Hi everyone, today we're going to walk you through the installation process of PNR2.5 chassis and the Kyosho EVO electronics. First of all, we will need all the parts showing on my desk. I will put the list of the parts in the description. Let's open up all the packages so we can be ready for the assembly. For MZ601, we will only need the pieces for the servo case. There should be 4 pieces total. Let's take MZ601, which is the servo saver, out of the package. I personally like to sort the parts on my desk so I can locate them easily during the assembly. First of all, we need to cut off the protruding piece on the servo motor cover to create space for the EVO board. I like to file it down a little bit after cutting it off so it's nice and flat and there will be plenty of space for wire to go through. Now we're ready to start the build. First of all, let's grab the servo case pieces. We will need this piece first. The longest pin is for the servo saver. Let's put it aside as we won't need it at the moment. We only need these 3 pins for the servo case, 1 long and 2 short. First, let's put one of the short pins into the very top slot. The longer pin goes into the slot on the left hand side. For the servo gears, there are markings on the back side of the gear, 2 dots indicating number 2, 1 dot indicating number 1, 3 dots indicating number 3. First, we will put number 1 gear on the top slot that has a short pin in it. Number 2 goes to the pin on the left hand side. Number 3 goes on top of number 1 gear. Instead of using the number 4 that comes with the gear set, we will use the brass gear from MR3056B instead. The brass gear goes on top of number 2 gear. So now we can put number 4 gear and the servo motor pinion gear back into the spare bag as we won't need them anymore. Now we have to attach the large servo case piece to the base. Once that's done, put the uninstalled short pin into the slot on the servo case. Now let's slide the servo output gear on the pin. Make sure gear is on the bottom. And then locate the long pin from servo saver and put it into the slot on the servo case base. Locate the servo saver push rod. There should be a large hole on one side and a smaller hole on the other side. Connect the side with the larger hole to the horn on the servo output gear. Slide the main servo saver unit onto the long pin on the right hand side and then connect the servo saver pin to the smaller hole on the push rod. Once that's done, please locate the smaller servo case cover and install it. There are plastic pins on the cover. Make sure to line up the pin and holes before pressing it down. Now the servo case is completed. Now please pay attention to the pin I'm pointing at. The pin should be protruding at this point. You will need to press it down all the way till it's flat with the inner part of the gear. Now we're ready to move on to the next step, installing the EVO board. First, let's look at the steering pod. While the wires are on the bottom, please turn the position tab until it sits horizontally and then insert it to the slot on the gear in the servo case. Once it's inserted, I like to hold everything with my left hand and then install the servo case cover. Make sure all the pins line up to its slot before pressing it down. Now let's look at the steering pod wire. See the space on the side of the servo case? The space is designed for steering pod wire to go through. You want to make sure the wire is sitting nicely within its space. Hold the servo case with your left hand. I like to sort the motor wires and make them pointing the rear of the chassis so they won't get in my way. Now, let's insert the servo motor into the servo case. Make sure the blue and red wire sits horizontally. Once that's done, we want to insert the power switch into the slot on the chassis. And then place the servo motor and case into the chassis as well. You might need to wiggle a little, but please don't force it. Once it's situated, time to install the servo motor cover. First, you want to make sure the wires are in the slot of the servo motor cover, and then put the cover in place. Once that's done, you want to grab two 2x4 countersunk screws from the chassis hardware bag and finally secure the servo motor cover onto the chassis. By doing such, the on and off switch should be fixed to its place as well. So now, we need to tin the battery terminals on the chassis. Alright, for this particular one right here, you want to be extra careful as the terminal is very close to the servo wires. We like to desolder the power wire that came with the board as they're too thin and flimsy. Let's use the high quality wire that comes with the chassis set. Let's tin the wire first and solder it back onto the board. You want to make sure the wire are soldered on the board at an angle like what I'm doing here, as you will need the clearance to install the top deck later on. To sort the wire, first you want to bend the switch wire at the edge of the board so it can be hidden under the board, and then try to sort the servo wire so it can be hidden under the board as well. The goal is to have the board sit as flat as possible. Now let's put the top deck on. You want to make sure the cover is sitting completely flat on the chassis before putting in the screws. You will need to use 4 2x4 button head screws. Please note that the plastic on the chassis is very strong, so when you put screw in, you want to screw in slowly. Keep the screws vertical and apply some force. Time to solder the battery wire onto the chassis. First things first, you want to estimate the length of the wire needed and cut off the excessive wire like this. Then, tin the wire and then solder onto the correct terminal as shown in the video. Now, it's time to put the servo unit cover onto the chassis. Please note that there is a small opening on the cover for the servo wire to go through. Before you install the cover, you want to make sure all the wires are in the opening before pressing it down and install the servo cover, or you could risk damaging the wires. Finally, we will need 4 2x4 button head screws to secure the servo cover onto the chassis. Almost done here. Let's solder the white wire onto the chassis. Let's solder one end first. Cut off the excessive wire and solder the other end as shown in the video. For the T-plate mount, you want to trim off a bit of the material so it won't be interfere with the on and off switch. And finally, install it onto the chassis with the supplied 2x6 countersunk screw. So we're done here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and see you in the next video.